Good evening to everybody. I'm grateful to all of you who managed to find time to spend this Friday evening with us. I'm welcoming you to the Citizens Dialogue, online Citizens Dialogue Europe in the Neighborhood. Let's talk beyond borders. Ukraine's path to the EU membership that is organized by not partisan Europa-Union Deutschland in cooperation with the Ukrainian Center for European Policy. I would like to notice that Citizen Dialogue is recorded and will be published on YouTube after the event. For anonymous participation, please feel free to change your name displayed in the settings. My name is Liubov Akulenko. I am Executive Director of Ukrainian Center for European Policy. Our think tank was established in 2014 when Ukraine signed association agreement with EU, and main focus of our activities is dedicated to the advocacy of pro-European reforms in Ukraine. Also, in 2014, Europa-Union Deutschland has been conducting citizens' dialogues on current European policy issues throughout Germany. It's like a coincidence, but we both started this project in the same year. Today, Citizens' Dialogue on EU integration of Ukraine is a second of a new three-part series of Citizens' Dialogue on EU enlargement under the motto Europe in the Neighborhood, Let's Talk Beyond Borders, funded by the Federal Foreign Office and the Federal Press Office of the German government. We would like to thank to all our sponsors for their financial support for enabling today's event. And this said, Citizens' Dialogue of this series will be on EU integration of Georgia in September. Also, we would like to express our sincere thanks to all the long-standing partners of the Citizens' Dialogue of Europa-Union Deutschland, who have once again contributed significantly to the event. I also have some technical remarks. First of all, everybody should be able to see the experts and the moderator and the presentation. Participants are not connected with the picture and are muted for the time being. In case you have any technical problems, please log in again via the access link. For further technical questions, write to the technical team via the Q&A button. There are three possibilities to participate actively in the dialogue. First possibility, communicate questions, concerns, positions in writing. We ask you to use your smartphone, tablet, or a second internet window on your computer to call up the website sli.com and enter the code #EUD. The second possibility is participation in the polls and votes via Slido. And the third possibility is actively asking questions on Zoom. If you want to speak or ask questions directly to the experts, please refer to the hand symbol at the bottom center of the bar. We will try to incorporate your statements into the questions during the course of the event. After I have called your names, the technical team will activate your microphone. In case Slido does not work for you, in exceptional cases, a question can also be transmitted via the Q&A button. The technical team in the background will then pass the question if possible. I would like to say some words about myself. As I mentioned before, our think tank was established in 2014. And I would like to admit that from this period, Ukraine managed to forget about Soviet standards and to introduce a lot of EU standards in business. Also, we managed to develop good trade relations with EU. It will be unfair if I say that Ukraine managed to implement all the obligations in the framework of association agreement, but still, being the country that did not have a membership perspective, I think that we did a lot. Before 2022, for us, it was like a movement in a black tunnel where we did not see the light at the end. Why I'm using such a phrase? Because usually countries that sign such agreements that predict implementation of such complicated reforms has a strong political motivator like membership perspective. Ukraine did not have it till 2022. Now, in case we receive a possibility and the accession negotiation will be open this or next year, it will be a historical momentum for Ukraine to implement fundamental reforms on practice, such as judiciary reform, media reform, public administration reform, and other fundamentals reform. And I think that the role of EU institutions, EU experts, and EU Ukrainian think tanks is great role, because usually we are those who are pushing our government, parliament, and other politicians not to forget about our obligations. And now I want to move to the conversation directly, but first of all, I would like to ask our participants to answer the question on Slido. What country are you joining us from today? We just want to understand with whom we are speaking today. And I would like to present our honorable speakers who agreed to take part in our discussion. Mikhail Gahler, a member of the European Parliament for the EVP Group, standing reporter of the European Parliament for Ukraine. I do not know if Mariia Mezentseva joined us. If not, I will...
Yes, I have.
Okay. She's member of Ukrainian Parliament and deputy head of the Committee on EU Integration. Also, we have Dmytro Naumenko, who is a senior analyst at the Ukrainian Center for European Policy, and we have Dr. Yuliya Bidenko, who is an associate professor at Kharkiv National University. So, just to understand with whom we're speaking, I see that most of the audience is like divided into two parts, Germany and Ukraine. And we have some people from France, some group of people from France, Belgium, Poland, who are interested in Ukrainian topic. But most of the people are from Germany and Ukraine. So I propose to move on. Before we move into the open discussion, we have our first voting question on Slido. I would like to encourage you to announce your request to speak via the hand symbol, but we will come back to the list of your questions and call you around 5:35 in the session dialogue with the participants. Now we have a question for the participants. First question: has your opinion towards Ukraine access to the EU changed since the Russian invasion in 2022? There are 4 options, and you can vote. And I will move to our speakers and ask them another question. Prior to the outbreak of Russian war of aggression in Ukraine 2022, how did the European Union and Ukraine collaborate and work together? Could you highlight some key areas of cooperation and achievements during this period? I would like to ask our speakers to speak near 2 or 3 minutes, just to be in time. And I would like not to use the phrase ladies first. Gentlemen will be first, so Mikhail Gahler, the floor is yours to answer the question about cooperation between Ukraine and EU, and can you highlight some key areas?
Yes, thank you very much. Of course, 3 minutes is a real challenge. As you rightly said, the accession perspective unfortunately needed this dreadful war to become more concrete. Prior to that, we had the association agreement and deep and comprehensive free trade agreement, which was active and which also on the substance had everything that was in it. It was part of the so-called acquis communautaire, but the clear perspective for membership was not explicitly announced there. Now we saw the timeline from last June when the European Council supported the candidate status for Ukraine. And since then, we have, apart from all the other support that are also war-related, we have prepared for the further steps to be taken. You know that in October we will have an assessment from the European Commission how far Ukraine has advanced. There were 7 major points which have sub-points which should be fulfilled. In the oral statement from June European Council, we had 2 of the 7 fulfilled. I'm not going now into the details, but I think we will need all the time now up to October, and then for the December European Council. For instance, if it were that in October the requirements were not yet fulfilled, I think then we need a final speed and a final push to get it done by December, whenever the European Council then should hopefully, and that was the wish of the European Parliament, is in its large majority, to get the accession started, the accession process started. Now, what is in the pipeline now as we speak, and I'm the co-rapporteur for that, is the Ukraine facility, which would replace the current support program from the 1st of January, which is a 4-year, 50 billion program with a comprehensive approach to address all the needs that are addressed and are to be addressed. And we see it as a point where both the reconstruction process and the accession process should be considered as one, as a parallel one, but one that is intertwined and that is nothing separately ongoing. So that is the perspective in this regard. And apart from that, you could hear Mr. Borrell, was it today or yesterday, speaking of another 20 billion package that is specifically for the defense issues. So that is not for the accession process as such. But as I said, we definitely need this push still during this year, and we know how difficult and what a challenge it is during this Russian aggression to be in parallel dealing with this program, the Ukraine facility. Ukraine will have to set up by the end of the year or at the very beginning of next year this Ukraine plan. So in a way that is your plan how to implement all these things that are to be done. I hear there are already some people sitting in a hotel at Kiev and making first drafts. That's good to hear, but indeed we need to be very precise. And on the way there, everything that is happening in legislation should be in line with the European legislation and not divert from this path. That is where we stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gahler. I would like to invite Dmytro Naumenko. I just want to hear your point of view, like position from Ukraine. Will it be the same or different?
Yes, good evening to everybody. Hi, Luba, and yeah, for supplementing Michael's, kind of strategic vision. Okay, let me take a big bit back to the past and if to say how we cooperate prior the full-scale invasion. So let's say the process was multifaceted to some extent. And a significant push first was made after the Revolution of Dignity and Maidan. So when many very important reforms were pushed by our Western partners, and the association agreement played a very tremendous role. So you might recall that it was enacted by parts. So trade, sectoral and political, and it promoted many important sectoral things that really marked the shift from post-Soviet legacy, I mean, to the modern economy and closer approximation to EU markets. And I could mention here such good examples as public procurement reform, the famous Prozoro system, technical regulation, I mean, standards for production of industrial goods, energy sector, if we are talking about gas market reform and unlocking the reverse gas supply from Europe to Ukraine, many positive changes in the agri-food sector concerning approximation to European sanitary and phytosanitary measures, taxation, customs, digital markets, so many other things. But the specific of this process was also marked by a fact that not much was done, I mean, in terms of really fundamental reforms. So there were, of course, some breakthroughs in building up the anti-corruption infrastructure or the state enterprises, corporate governance reform, so etc. But still, we need to do a lot in these fundamental things like judicial system reform or civil service reform, where unfortunately we still have problems. And it's not a surprise that as a compromise, the European Commission put this 7 post-candidate demands to Ukraine, because these are all really crucial issues for us to move further. And we hope that that now opening the accession negotiations, I mean, will finally push our political elites just to reconsider the strategic vision and yes, to make critical steps to fix these fundamental issues, to promote even more integration into the European Union single market. And I hope that at the beginning of the next year, this process will be irreversible. So let me stop here.
Thank you, Dima. Now I will move to Mariia Mezentseva, who is a member of Ukrainian Parliament, who is like very active on European agenda. We will be grateful for your point of view.
Yes, thank you, Liubov. That's very pleasant to speak on the panel of professionals and the people whom we started cooperating, for instance, with Mr. Gahler 10 years ago in the European Parliament. And the academia, of course, represented by Yuliya in the technical sector, and NGO represented by Dmytro. And of course, dear Liubov, your leadership was always extremely important, because in European integration, there is still a lot of technicalities, but sometimes they need a political will. And I think the political will and a great push started from 2019, when on the day of the first let's say, first working day of the convocation started with at least 15 EU laws. We voted until 2 a.m., but we were very firm and very pushy to finalize what couldn't be done in the previous convocation, when people needed more motivation, people needed to get into the plenary hall, being called by the speaker 5 times at least, etc. With the 3.5 years before the full-scale aggression in the parliament, we have voted on numerous impressive technical regulations, interwater land transport, the extra laws And one of the laws that was, let's say, the life of which was the shortest one. It was 4 months and a half. It was linked to ACAI agreement. And I spent some hours today at one of the meteorological state companies, which is given certificates to business and state sector companies. And I can say that so many things in the daily life, specifically right now, are extremely important, and they're linked to European integration. Indeed, when on the 4th day of the full-scale invasion, President Zelensky has sent, together with the speaker and the prime minister, an application. And as parliamentarians, it was always also a surprise for us. We fulfilled the criteria to be accepted as a candidate state. Now, indeed, as Mr. Gahler mentioned it, we are so very much looking forward to the assessment, the written assessment of the European Commission by October, fulfilling in full two of the 7 points of the criteria. But I would like to announce that there are more coming on anti-corruption. We would renew, for instance, the declarations. They were paused and, let's say, stopped since the full scale. There will be some already laws finalizing the judicial system reform, the constitutional court reform, and all that is realistic because Ukrainian parliament doesn't even debate sometimes the EU laws, what I can see in practice, because it's been agreed at the coordination board meeting level of the party leaders, and then it passes easily in the plenary hall, collecting usually a constitutional majority, which means more than 300 votes. So I feel that there was an extra technical, let's say, focus, because what we have heard in Brussels, just being there 2 weeks ago, is indeed the homework is on our side. There is no deadline so that we open the negotiations, but it's on our side to fulfill the criteria as the lawmakers. But of course, in practical, when I see the billboards and the functioning supportive programs for Hromadas, for the territories, for the occupied territories in different regions of Ukraine, for me, this is the success. This is our common result on the ground. So I think just to conclude, we're moving in the right direction. And what Putin has indeed achieved, he made this push for better European integration in a faster speed mode. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariia, for your input and for your for showing us that you are understanding European integration in technical details. Now I will ask Dr. Yuliya Bidenko to share with us your point of view.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. Actually, as an expert for the EU delegation expert initiative Team Europe, I want to underline that probably it wasn't 2019 as a milestone, year to intensify EU-Ukraine relations. I just want to remind that even within the structure of EU partnership, Ukraine was one of the largest recipients of the grants and program, and one of the most active participant, for example, in Erasmus Plus, Horizon programs, which were open to Ukraine even prior the Euromaidan revolution. But after the association agreement was signed in 2014, definitely it was a shift point for Ukrainian business, for Ukrainian large business and industry, because the European Union became the prior trade partner for Ukraine. And due to this agreement and due to the Russian aggression to Ukraine, which was launched in 2014, Ukraine rebuilt its trade ties and even kind of processes of production, and they changed a standard for agriculture production, for example, and then agriculture trade. The second very important point was, of course, visa-free travels opportunities for Ukraine, which come into power in 2017. And I will also want to remind the public that to get these visa-free opportunities, Ukraine also launched numerous reforms which weren't connected like directly with the traveling opportunities, but also, for example, they supposed to launch a more transparent public budgeting for political parties. And what I wanted to add also here, that there were numerous programs for Ukraine launched by the EU before the full-scale invasion. And as for me, the most important among them were EU for society, EU for business, and the EU for government. And it was comprehensive initiatives. And I want to emphasize and appreciate the special role of the EU in decentralization reform in Ukraine, and also in reform of administrative service. Due to the assistance of the European Union, even small villages get the points to assess the administrative services from the state. And this system really changed the attitudes of kind of broad Ukrainian public towards what is real European management, what is governmental management could be. And actually the other steps which were very important, and they really were started in 2019, 2020s, it was the next steps, not only related to the reforms within Ukraine, but also with the kind of mutual, better understanding and connection. And among these were a better accession of Ukraine to single digital market in the European Union. And before the full-scale war, it was also hot debates in Ukraine and a lot of initiatives to voluntarily join the European Green Deal. Actually, Ukraine was probably in minority of countries outside the EU, which wanted to take part in these initiatives to launch a green economy voluntarily. So as for me, I totally agree here with all what was said, but also the member of European Parliament who pointed out that the reconstruction recovery process should be the EU accession process taken as one. And of course, for me, it should be promoted with a better economy, better green economy, and better science and education initiatives together with like architectural or infrastructural reconstruction in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuliya, and thank you all the speakers. I see that we are a little bit running off time, so the next time I will be more strict. Just to summarize, I see that we demonstrated positive dynamics in different sectoral reforms, and now we are moving to political part that is formulated in the form of 7 candidacy demands. And if to come back to the poll on Slido, we see that it is like a very supportive vote for Ukraine, that we have like 47% of people who were supportive even before the war started and still are supportive. And we have 42% of people who changed their opinion when the war started, and they are now more in favor of accession. So I believe, of course, we cannot say that it's like the mirror of German society, but we wish to have such, and we need to have such support from German society to our negotiation process. So I propose to move to the next question, and we have such a question. In light of the Russian full-scale invasion, should an accelerated accession process to be applied to Ukraine? You can see the options how to answer, and yes, no, or other options. And now I will move to our ladies. Mariia, Mezentseva, I will be grateful for your input. What do you think about accelerated accession process? Should it be applied for Ukraine?
Yes, thank you. I think it's been already accelerated, and as the history of enlargement of the EU from 6 founding members to 27 currently shows us that every history of enlargement is different, is challenging and uneven. So the criteria that were applied to the largest enlargement process, which was in 2010 with most of our neighbors, wasn't the same as it is right now for the Balkan states or ourselves or Georgia. Moldova and Georgia to come, because they haven't had yet received a candidate status. Hopefully, the will of the people will be reflected in the will of the government, which is not yet the case. So for me, very briefly, I think it's already in the progress, and it depends on us, on the fulfillment of our homework, how the speed can maintain or accelerate. Definitely lowering the speed will not be possible any longer, because in various regions of Ukraine, and the recent polls presented in the capital of Kiev just last week shows us that the figure of support, as Liubov has just recently said, increased in some areas up to 90%. So this is very important, because people in the end, after we will pass all the laws, all the criteria will be met, the people will vote whether they see themselves in the EU. And that's something that is not debated or not discussed very often. So I think the speed is great. And one thing, if I may, just 10 seconds, which I would want to add to the previous part, unprecedented military support has started. First, in 74 years' time, a direct military help. Mr. Gahler said about the package of 50 billion. Then there is a constant help in training, direct military support, B2B, EU in general, which has never taken place. And that's something that gives us more hope daily. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariia. As I understood, you support the accelerated accession, yes?
Yes. Yes, if we may say accelerated accession, yes to accelerated accession. If we are good in fulfilling our homework.
Okay, Yuliya Bidenko, what will be your answer?
Yeah, I don't want to boost any fatigue from Ukraine, because now I'm in Germany, but I arrived kind of 2 days before from Ukraine, and I can see that perspectives are pretty different. And people here in Germany sometimes experience, this fatigue from Ukraine and Ukrainian questions probably. Yeah, I'm totally in favor with the kind of fast track of Ukraine to be considered as a potential EU member. But from another point of view, as a political scientist, I can say that Ukraine do and did a lot before even the full-scale invasion to, to approximate its legislation, for example. And it was a huge work which was done by the government, by the parliament, by the local councils, by the way, and other institutions like universities, like businesses to come closer to European Union. So I also want to echo somehow Mariia and said that there is no single framework to access to the EU, and every enlargement was based on somehow political decisions as well. So we need to use this window of opportunity, of course, as Ukrainians, but from the other point of view, there was an opinion poll, and even Ukrainians said that, yes, we need this Euro integration process because reforms are in the interest of Ukrainian people. So we need to do all the reforms first.
Okay, and Mr. Mikhail Gahler, what is your point of view?
Yes, thank you. I'm amongst those who said Ukraine should not be given a special status, but the EU accession process should be reformed in general. So what do I mean by that? I mean, we have accelerated the formal status, that is the candidate status, that has been put forward as a clear political signal. Regardless what happens, it is clear where Ukraine belongs after this dreadful war. It does not belong certainly to the Russian zone, and it doesn't belong to a gray zone, but it belongs to us, and it will be part of us. So that is the formal thing. On the substance, indeed, the acquis needs to be fulfilled, and insofar we are prepared to be very helpful in all respects, but it must definitely be the political will on the Ukrainian side as well. And when I come to the question how to reform the process, I think what we are thinking about in the parliament is that, for instance, and that is already to an extent even in the association treaty and the free trade agreement, that if in certain areas of policy Ukraine fulfills objectively the criteria in the single market in some areas or in other areas, that we could, so to say, separately activate this already. So in a way that you would get in step by step already in order to anticipate and fix also the reforms that have been made and done to fix that. And we are also thinking, but that is by no means yet, so to say, formalized, that at some stage, at a later stage, that we would invite not only then Ukrainians, but other candidate countries who are in an advanced state to send their members of parliament as observers already in the European Parliament. Last time with the big accession, we had it only once the negotiations had ended. For instance, in 2003, the negotiations had ended with the 10 countries, and then they were already directly then sending observers, and then they exceeded in 2004. Perhaps one finds a mechanism to get such a observer status a bit earlier, but that is at the beginning of our thoughts, to also to make it visible that you are already on the way, and in a way also in the building already. I mean, we have anyhow the Ukrainian flag as the first flag, both in Brussels and in Strasbourg at the mast with all the other flags. So we are already indicating not only solidarity but our will. But as I said, the substance of the acquis cannot be overrun or ignored, but we can be more flexible, so to say, having a direct reaction when we can state, okay, this chapter is done, and how we can then get Ukraine already partly and increasingly comprehensively into the EU without yet being formally a member.
Thank you, Mikhail Gahler. You are like the mirror of EU society for understanding this question. And Dima, what is your point of view? It looks like that all Ukrainians have the same point of view.
Maybe, I don't know. I could only shed light on my personal expert opinion, and yeah, I'm very much in favor of our poll results that says that Ukraine shouldn't be given a special status, but the EU accession process should be reformed in general. I guess this is the first step is to be resolved in this manner, because if we are talking about accelerated EU accession and take back to our domestic discussion that was raised by our political elites. Yes, so they thought that okay, for Ukraine it may be repeated a case of a political accession decision like it was made for Romania or Bulgaria. Yeah, and it's currently not possible because, as we wrote in our recent policy paper, it put us to a risk of a bad expectation management. So when yes, there are very high hope for fast track accession to the European Union, and then we are at risk of stacking into very difficult, comprehensive, fundamental and sectoral reforms, and yeah, it may ruin the whole process. But in the meantime, Ukraine is a very special case for EU enlargement, because never before the Union was adopting a country in a large-scale war, and Ukraine's economy should be restructured and reformed very deeply, because after the war, all our traditional industries, so unfortunately, they will be ruined. so by many negative consequences of the war. So I'm talking about agri-food, our traditional sectors of industry, etc., etc. And the first thing that you should avoid is to reform its enlargement, let's say, methodology by removing the major stumbling block for accession. What do I mean here? So the EU should be more flexible in terms of, let's say, organic or phase-in accession, as Mikhail correctly mentioned, that allowing Ukraine for applied integration into the several sectors where we will demonstrate good approximation of EU acquis and implementation practices. So, I mean, not being blocked by, let's say, benchmarks in fundamentals and the absence of political compromise at the EU level or between EU member states. So it should be a purely merit-based system when we talk about the very sectoral integration things. And the approach to Ukraine should be very reasonably or wisely developed in this context, because it should be, of course, system of conditions. So the process should be conditional, but not stumbling in the meantime. And it should be developed a special system of concessions, especially for our sectoral integration. Because if to say, for example, about the Green Deal agenda, it has been mentioned already today. So we need to redesign our energy sector dramatically. So it would take enormous amount of time and investments. So it's not a simple case. So the war deteriorated the situation even further. And for this purpose, yes, the methodology should be adjusted, and the political compromise should be reached regarding our accession pathway. Thank you.
Thank you, Dima, for your intervention. As we see, our questions are divided. Our point of view is divided between speakers. And the reaction of participants is the next, that participants do not support the idea of special status, but support the idea that EU accession process should be reformed in general. Okay, it's interesting. Now we have a possibility to move to the open dialogue with the participants and to provide possibility for participants to ask their questions orally. First of all, I will check if we have people in Zoom who want to ask questions. Okay, currently I see that it's like a Friday evening and we do not have a lot of people who wants to speak actively, but there are some questions on Slido and all the speakers can see the questions, so we can at least try to answer on them. I'm looking what are the most interesting.
Well, I mean, we could go one. I could go quickly one by one, and the others as well. I mean, then everybody's covered.
The first question is about opening of accession negotiation till the end of the year. It's like everybody is interested in this. Mikhail Gahler, if you...
Yes. Yes, there is a chance once the 7 points are considered to be fulfilled, and I hope and I want that we come to this point. So there is this chance. Yes.
About question about common security and defense policy.
Yes, I mean, we have clearly said as a parliament in our June resolution that Ukraine's future is not only in the EU, but also in NATO. And I think this country with its, so to say, unsolicited experience in war will be anyhow at the end of the war have the most experienced army, and we will see to it that Ukraine will be continuously armed up against this Russia. And when it is inside the EU at some point and inside NATO at some point, and I would say simply from the substance, it's quicker to get into NATO than into the EU. I think you will be an enormous contribution to the overall European and transatlantic security. So that is what I see it. On the redistribution of power, of course, if somebody comes new and is in the east, there is more a shift to the east, but there are others from the Balkans that is a bit more in the southeast. So I think we are all the European Union and all have their specific interests on specific issues. And it's not that it is east against west or north and south. Every concrete issue sees new coalitions of interest and where it goes. But of course, Ukraine is where it is. And once you're in, you will have your say. And yeah.
I'm sorry, technical team is asking me just to provide a possibility for each of the speakers.
Of course. Yeah, I can stop at any point.
Yeah, but for me, it's interesting to hear your point of view. How will the accession of Ukraine influence the political discussion and balance within the EU? That the eastern part of the EU will get more influence. I have a feeling that it's like an argument in the EU, and a lot of politicians are worried on this issue. What is your point?
Yeah, but I thought I had just answered it. I think, yes, it will be so, but it's not that somebody only because the country is in the east or wherever, then all points would shift in this direction. Each and every individual policy dossier, regardless what topic, finds new coalitions and interests in the EU. So you cannot say that Ukraine, lying where it is, would always side with those in the east. That may very well not be the case. So I'm relaxed about that. We had a similar discussion when the 10 countries came. Now Ukraine is one country, admittedly a big one, but you are 44 million. We had 75 million coming in 2004 and another Romania, Bulgaria, then we were slightly above 100 million. That is far more. And so I'm relaxed about that. Once you fulfill the criteria and you are duly in, you play your role.
Thank you, Mr. Gahler. I want to ask Dima, now this question disappeared, but there was a question, what as I understood, civil society can do to be involved in the negotiation process. This question disappeared, as I see, but I'm also
interested. Yeah, but would you like I answer first? Yes, and at this question, right?
I would like you to answer this question: the role of civil society in the negotiation process of Ukraine.
It's a kind of complex question because the role of civil society into the whole European integration process, let's say, is enormous in Ukraine. So we're kind of a specific country where civil society played as a very active role from the beginning, if you count down from the Euromaidan revolution. And it took a very strong voice when the first deep Euro integration reforms were conducted in the country. So our experience proves this. So because we were advocating so many important sectoral reforms in Ukraine, working with governmental stakeholders, and of course, we are not a game changer. Yeah, so not to be on the wishful thinking side, but we could change the things, or let's say to prevent bad things to happen. When we're talking about the implementing the EU norms and standards in Ukraine. And among the civil society sector, there is a strong European integration wing, and we would like to continue to play this role. So now more on the advocacy side, so providing our non-biased watchdog function and to deliver our independent sectoral expertise into the pre-accession and accession discussions. But also we would like to help our governmental teams that will conduct the sectoral accession negotiations, just to develop reasonable negotiation positions, let's say.
Thank you, Dima. I would like to ask Mariia, since I know that she is visiting a lot different EU countries, and potentially she can feel the moods inside the EU. And this question, which consequences, what is the EU doing right now to be able to enlarge? Is it a priority? What is your point of view?
I think it hasn't been a priority before February. I think it's becoming a priority because of the general understanding that the neighborhood policy cannot be strong without accepting Ukraine into the EU. We have proven for more than 10 years, or almost for the last 9 years, since 2014, that we have become a reliable partner, a security shield. There was also a question which was regarding to the security and defense common system, I think, within the list of these questions I've seen. Also, in terms of trade, we are already experiencing, since the full-scale invasion, it's been renewed for a second time, the easier way to trade without extra barriers. Okay, it's been renewed yearly, but it's a huge, it was a huge burden for Ukrainian business to follow the previous rules. Yes, indeed, we have some technicalities with Ukrainian wheat and our Polish partners, but I think we have seen that this is critical. The acceptance is coming from the both sides. We have met the Commissioner for Enlargement also 2 weeks ago in Brussels, and I felt only positivity from this meeting. There was no criticism, and yet again, it's up to government, parliament, office of the president to lead the tasks we have right now. I think we would be the only parliament in the world who will have no holidays. We are not saying, you know, this is good or bad. We just have our daily life linked to European integration, which is rolling, and we have to fulfill a lot of job as of now. So I would say the will is on the both sides, and we have two to tango.
Thank you, Mariia. You also touched another question about our negotiations with Hungary and Poland. And Yuliya, Dr. Yuliya Bidenko, you mentioned that you are a political analyst, and which consequences will be there for the functioning of the EU when Ukraine joins the EU? Maybe political, economical, or any consequences? What do you think?
Thank you, Liubov. I was intended to ask you, to answer exactly this question, because there are some concerns about how the EU will be functioning and whether Ukraine can negatively affect its functioning. But I want to warn you that actually the EU is pretty complicated system, but it is very balanced system. And for me, it is not about the empowering Eastern voices within the European Parliament, for example, or the European Commission. It's more about how to balance this system more. And of course, we are on the same page with Poland, Baltic states, and our neighbors from the Eastern Europe, but also as a country which is suffering from the war and really has a lot of hopes for reconstruction. We need this old Europe, Western Europe to assist us. So I don't think that there will be kind of a single Eastern European flank, which will, spoil the functioning of the whole European Union. And what is about Hungary, Poland, and some constraints that we have at this moment, I do believe that entering to the EU and being the equal as a member could even ease some negotiation and can drive us to the single or joint programs with Hungary, for example, educational initiatives, cultural initiatives, and for example, for the more straight partnership within the culture initiatives and so on and so forth. And as to the Poland, I want to say that at this moment, they are the most reliable partners of Ukraine, but when it comes to the trade issues, of course, every country has its own national interests, and regarding the Ukrainian grain trade, it's also attempts of Poland to protect it. But when Ukraine will enter the EU, I believe it could be happen within like 5 years. Ukrainian farmers will negotiate with the European Commission, and probably they will be in the same conditions as other European countries' agricultural industries.
Mm-hmm. Thank
If
you.
I may-
The direct question to Mr. Gahler about the support of Ukraine.
Yes, well, first of all, there is, I think if you look on the map, of course, the immediate neighbors and the Scandinavians would spontaneously be more vocal. But overall, I think it is, as it is in our joint European interest, it is a question at the end of political leadership in all the countries. And when reason prevails, political the common sense, I would say, political common sense would make it very clear that this path of Ukraine towards the EU must be supported by all. I mean, a country like Portugal, they have had so many Ukrainians since many years. I think they will be among the more supportive ones, although they're the most distant away. And I'm, shall I say, currently positively impressed by Italy, by the current government. I had expected more problems. To the contrary, they are quite cooperative. I have some concerns about the Netherlands. Currently, they will have elections in November. They had once even this initiated referendum against the DCFTA and the association agreement, which makes the country a bit more difficult. But overall, I would like to say something quickly to Hungary. I mean, remember how countries that are inside have blocked those who wanted in. Italy was very nasty to Slovenia at some point. Slovenia was quite nasty on Croatia at some point, and the poor Macedonians have suffered Greek and now Bulgarian blockades over issues that have nothing to do with the acquis communautaire. So Hungary is in, you are out. So my really friendly suggestion, settle the issue with the Hungarian language and the schools. Reinstate the status quo ante that was before. It is always a problem, whatever your objectives are, to get, if people have the feeling they are losing rights or possibilities that they are getting angry. So reinstate the old thing, but add more Ukrainian classes obligatorily. So they cannot argue that it couldn't make it all in Hungarian. I think that is possible. It was possible in earlier years, and it didn't bother too many people, but oblige them to simply have more classes in Hungarian, in Ukrainian. Otherwise, they will use this point to block you, and you should not give them this point. Whether we share, yeah.
Wants to react maybe on language issue, as I feel, but
yeah.
Yeah, I'm with Mr. Gahler on this point. The only thing we have already seen how our Hungarian counterparts used the national minority issue not in technical matters, but rather in philosophical. We have 100 plus schools in Ukraine teaching Hungarian as native language. We will do everything possible to provide more teachers to teach Ukrainian as a state language. We have had and we have seen the points in the high school, very low points of the graduate exams, which are conducted, as you know, in state language. Indeed, there can be improvements, and we have postponed by one academia year the increase of the state language in the schools for Hungarian minority. For instance, there's Romanian minority. We have 153 nationalities in Ukraine, and only Hungarians are super vocal that, for instance, the national minorities law is a catastrophe and a disaster. We have spoken to our Hungarian and Romanian counterparts. We agreed to put it down back on a technical working group level. Ukraine requested to reopen the working group 3 times since February 2022. It hasn't been done yet. We do hope after summer holidays in Europe, it will be conducted. We have seen the positivity on a state level from Hungary that they salute the postponement of the implications of the law for the schools to be having higher percentage of Ukrainian language. So the cooperation is still ongoing. We will be happy to reflect on the technical thing, but the philosophy that Ukraine is trying to put down specifically Hungarian minority is a political wrong statement, which Hungary is trying to implicate everywhere. We are ready to cooperate, and I think we have shown it also in the Council of Europe, where we will have a resolution on the state of national minorities in Ukraine. And of course, you may know that this is a constant topic of debates in every session of the Council of Europe.
So please remove it. They are in and they can block everything. I mean, as I said, the Macedonians are suffering it since a quarter of a century. And so don't give them an argument or a pretext. On the substance, I agree with you, but they are in and you are out. So remove it. And as I said, the old status plus more Ukrainian classes. So yeah, everything else technical, it doesn't help because as long as Orban has this argument, it's awful.
Yeah, Michael, but we're doing what you're saying. We were insisting on more classes of they said no. That's what we were trying to do. We postponed for a year.
I know.
And we need to find a way to move. So we've given more on our side.
So it's like for us, personally, for me, it's like a repetition of accession process. Currently, we understood who potentially can block our movement, Poland and Hungary. And now I want to ask the last question to Dmytro and Yuliya. Would Ukraine join Poland's and Hungary's political camp if they join the EU? I suppose that here is the meaning that Poland and Hungary, for me, are those countries who regularly do not support EU norms, and I also had such an idea that potentially Ukraine can be such as Poland and Hungary. What do you think, Dmytro?
Oh, it's a kind of very interesting question, by the way. So because it would depend strongly on the current accession talks opening, the conditions that would be applied to Ukraine, and of course on strategic vision of our ruling elites of a country political model that would persist during the after-war times. Of course, there is a risk. So I would be quite frank here that Ukraine would follow a case of urbanization, yes, in terms of political system and just deteriorating the balance of power so in the country. But here the European Union should be, persistent enough to prevent this scenario. I mean, again, developing a wise system of conditions just to avoid it. So because the European Union should resolve this situation first internally, so with Poland and Hungary, and the outcomes of such political decision would also influence Ukraine. Because probably the EU treaties will be amended somehow just to prevent this shifts back from the EU's rule of law and Copenhagen criteria, and so many conditionalities, on this way. So to summarize, there is a risk, but I very much hope that we will avoid it together with Poland and Hungary.
Thank you, Dima. I just want to reflect that I agree, like 50-50, since no Poland, no Hungary did not have that situation that we have now. We are in the war, and sometimes centralization can help you to solve the issues quicker, as the example is with evacuation that was realized by our railway system. Due to the fact that railway system is centralized in Ukraine, we managed to organize evacuation very fast.
Right, Luba. I've mentioned specifically that would be the task for the post-war period. So because currently during the war times, yes, I mean the reasonable level of centralization is necessary.
Yeah. So the risk is just not to copy this centralization after the war, because now we need it. Since during the wartime, I think Deutsche Bahnhof is not so centralized, and I'm not sure that it will be so fast solving the issue of evacuation as Ukrainian railway system managed to do. So the last, the same question.
Pardon, Luba, by the way, the finalization of task of the reform of the constitutional court would be a good marker during this process. So by the way, we will see it soon, I guess.
Okay.
Yes, very soon.
Yes, I agree, but it should also not give the impression that from one extreme, how it was composed before, and now there are 5 vacant seats. It's not, so to say, a one-man veto show. Yeah, it's not that the president should have, so they should not come from the other side and then be considered to be the president's guys. That's also not what about the independence of a constitutional court is. So no vetoes for the executive side on the composition of a constitutional court or any highest courts.
Okay. Dr. Yuliya Bidenko, what is your point of view?
Thank you. As an author of the Ukrainian report for Freedom House, Nation in Transit, I also tried to outline that judiciary reform before the war was a key point, and still it is a key point for Ukraine. So the rule of law is a huge problem during the war, because it's a huge demand from Ukrainian public, from civil society and expert community to maintain the rule of law in Ukraine and to provide a better human rights protection. And what we can see in Poland and Hungary is just amplification of the populism. And I really afraid that having this centralization of power during the war, which, as you said, can be very efficient to cope the urgent problems, I'm really afraid that probably Mr. Zelensky and his team will try to change, for example, electional legislation and to enjoy the power they have got during the war. And being a person from Kharkiv, I can say that decentralization is really important. And as soon as decentralization will be relaunched in Ukraine and communities will be will get their power and financial autonomy again, for me it will be the even more clear sign that current government is ready to be European government and act as a European government in our idealistic view. Thank you.
I'm grateful for your frank that you are so frank with us, and so the audience can understood that we really want to become a member of EU, but we want to be honest and to implement everything honestly. So I propose to move to the pre-last question. It sounds like, in your opinion, what reforms do Ukraine and the EU need to implement for Ukraine's successful accession to the EU? It's a question to the speakers, and it is a question to the participants. So we will be grateful a lot if you can answer like top 3 reforms that Ukraine needs to implement. Dmytro, what is your point of view? Just 1 minute, top 3 reforms.
I would put reform number 1, let's say, finalizing our defense sector reform and armed forces reform. I would like to say it's critical, yeah, for surviving this war, to receive more Western weapons and the effective use, and to guarantee that Ukraine will be an available member of the EU common security and defense policy. Of course, the second line, also a critical reform of fundamentals cluster, if to speak in terms of enlargement methodology. So here the rule of law reforms, including judicial and anti-corruption systems, then reform of public administration. It is a kind of key reform to reach sustainable progress into implementation of EU acquis in Ukraine. And third place, I would put a set of important sectoral reforms, which are important for our trade and integration into EU single market. So let's say agri-food reform, customs, technical regulation reform, and digital market. So that's my personal biased prioritization. So
Okay.
I guess it would be a point, points of growth during the post-war period, and these sectors are currently vital for our survival during the war times. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gahler, what are 3 reform priorities from EU side that EU need to implement for Ukraine's successful accession?
Well, we should definitely make use of the provisions in the treaty where we have these so-called passerelle clauses, in which we can already, without treaty changes, once and for the last time unanimously agree to switch to qualified majority voting in the council, and that is in the foreign policy and security policy. I mean, the exception when it's about going to war or not, then there is everybody needs to agree, because there is no majority that could overrule a country that doesn't want to participate in a military mission. So, but overall, we should switch to foreign policy. Then we need to see that we get own resources for the EU budget, and not this horse trading every 7 years, but own resources, for instance, a certain promille of the value-added tax, something that gives us automatically a secured income, and where every country would then contribute to its strength or weakness. So that is would be a good mechanism to do that. On the Ukrainian side, I see, as it was mentioned, the judiciary is very important to be reformed, because all those investors who would like to come, they want to be sure when there is something to be settled legally, that there is a court system that is efficient and is not biased against foreigners, for instance. So the judiciary is very good. The entire fight against corruption, all these institutions that have been set up should be and remain or become again really independent in their works. And third, as so much money will be pouring into the country after the war, it is important that the local level is strengthened. The central level will not be able, and we know it from existing member states, to handle all the projects and formulate the projects. We have all these monies that are currently spent in member states that are not spent. It is because they are not able on a level, on a higher level, to formulate the projects, and also not on the local level. I think Ukraine should, in this regard, learn from Poland. The voivodeships are the central level where projects and policies are formulated, and the money flows off. And that is excellent, relatively excellent how it works in Poland. Get together with them on this way, but do not think that you can, from the central level, administer the huge amount that comes, because it's always connected to projects and co-financing. So projects have to be developed, and the ideas will not come from a ministry. They will come from the local level, bottom up, and that will make Ukraine strong overall in the country, and not only in a strengthened ministry. Thank you.
Thank you. Mariia Mezentseva, what from your point of view are three top priority reforms that Ukraine need to implement?
Unfortunately, I will not give you three. I think everything is important. If one falls out, the system doesn't work. So I think we're moving smoothly to the fulfillment first of the 7 criteria, but working daily on association agreement in one of the smallest but the bravest committee of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukrainian Parliament. Our priority is to put on the wheels everything we've been tasked to. So whether that would be constitutional reforms, finalizing the three international experts plus 3 national ones, or voting on bringing back declarations, or finalizing national minority laws, everything is extremely important. So my priority is the coherence of what is happening, so that there will be no bars, like, you know, in the bar tables you have very low levels and very high levels, like we've had, for instance, in technical regulations in agriculture, which has improved in the last 3 years, also together with your pressure. Thank you.
Dr. Yuliya Bidenko, what is your point of view?
Well, if I should say it regarding Ukraine moving to the EU under the normal circumstances, I would say that it will be judiciary reform, human rights enforcement, and probably anti-corruption reform and reform of public services. But also, as a Ukrainian, as a realist, I can say that Ukraine will need to correct its electoral rules soon, because we have kind of 8 million of people outside the country, and we need to launch very transparent, democratic, and competitive elections. And the other block, which is very important for me, is a kind of a social block. It's a pension reform, which we are desperately needed. It's a reform of social protection, and probably it is a healthcare reform regarding the number of veterans and people with disabilities, people in trauma, that we will have and already have in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yuliya. And we are moving to, okay, I see that there are reactions from the participants, but it's difficult to systemize and to see what reforms are more important, what are less important. The only thing that I understood that it's corruption is the word corruption is popular here. As I understood, it is connected with Ukraine, but also there are some reforms, and not only public administration reform, rule of law, judicial reform, but also important thing for EU, it's like qualified majority voting. So yeah, it's not so easy to summarize, but at least I see that participants are synchronizing with your point of view, I mean experts' point of view. And now we have the last the final question only to the experts, and I ask you to be quick And short, how can citizens and civil society support the process of Ukraine's integration into the EU? Dmytro, you will be first.
Okay, I actually answering this question already. Yeah, but may say more in a more precise manner. What should we do as a civil society? Of course, for civil society, opening the accession negotiation would be a huge challenge. So because all of the activities we did before, it was a kind of a homework in the kindergarten. Yes. So now we will face a really complex, challenging situation when we should push our political elites, our government, to make really fundamental structural change and to start it during the war times. That is per se not easy task. Plus, we need to do advocacy now at the EU level as well. So especially working with the European member states, various positions, and to try and to contribute to resolve the political conflict in situation. So regarding Ukraine's accession. And also we should do our classical watchdog function and to provide our independent expertise to the government, to the parliament. Yeah, so Mariia perfectly knows it, because unfortunately, our state machine doesn't have enough capacity to tackle this difficult accession task. And the war deteriorated its capability even more. And as always, yeah, we should do even very applied tasks during this process.
Thank you, Dmytro. Mrs. Mariia Mezentseva, what is your point of view? You are working like inside the parliament, and how do you think what CSO can do? How we can help?
Well, I think you should continue helping us in analytics. As I said, there's 15 members of staff working for the committee. We indeed reformed other committees a little bit. There's a representative for EU integration in each committee. However, I still see that the most overload of the work is on our secretariat of our committee. And I think we should come back to the idea already with the new ambassador from September, which will be focusing on extra experts for our EU committee of the Verkhovna Rada. There were promised 65 persons. We haven't received any of them yet, so I think we should talk to the newly appointed ambassador from September onwards so that the wheels roll further with the fastest speed. And of course, we will always support you because you need funds as well. And that's a great cooperation with foreign independent platforms from Germany, France, Italy, other member states who supported dramatically, specifically your work to make the laws coherent with the directives and regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariia. Mr. Mikhail Gahler, what is your point of view? Of course, you are a member of the parliament, but at least maybe you have some recommendations for us.
Yes, no, definitely. I think that it's amazing how the Ukrainian civil society has been, not only since the start of the war, but also even in the run-up to the revolution of dignity. You were essential for its success, and ever since you have accompanied the different governments in asking the right questions and pushing and demanding whenever there was developments that were not helping the establishment of democracy further. But now with this clear EU perspective, I think you need to remain vigilant. You need to come up with constructive proposals and tell both the government structures, but also us, what's ongoing and where we can come in to be supportive. And insofar, I'm looking forward to a continued good cooperation. And but as always, I mean, we have this dreadful war which Ukraine needs to win. And that is, our hearts and minds are with you in this regard, because that comes first. And in parallel, I have to say, it's amazing how much you achieve in spite of this war. I mean, all your forces, all your capacities are focused on all these things at the same time. It's really amazing how you manage to provide so many things in spite of this this aggression. So I'm really saluting all those who are giving every who are doing so much. So thank you for all that. I'm really we are willing to continue the close cooperation, and I'm looking forward to September when I'm next time in Kiev and meet some of you or many of you again. And till then, Slava Ukraini za перемогу. All the best.
Thank you. Dr. Yuliya Bidenko, what is your point of view on this issue?
Thank you. It is very challenging, you know, to say more after such inspiring remarks from the speakers. But actually, I would like to emphasize that at this moment, for Ukrainian citizens, for Ukrainian society, to join the EU is like kind of a unifying idea. It's a major prior idea. Due to sociological opinion polls, there are 87% of people who would vote to join EU. And there is no divisions between East and West of Ukraine, which is very significant because often Ukraine was portrayed like a divided country, but not they are not divided around the idea to join the EU. Moreover, during the war, the identity of Ukrainians who consider themselves be not only Ukrainian citizens, but also the part of European civilization, they consider themselves to be Europeans, is increased from 25% to 51%, which is kind of skyrocketing. So half of Ukrainians have also this European identity. And as for the professional civil society, I would like just to count the main or prior functions here. It's not only the traditional watchdog function or function of monitoring, but I would like to underline that since 2014, Ukrainian civil society and think tanks, especially think tanks, they're very active and very capable to even write drafts of law, to propose some initiatives to members of parliament, and to advocate the key reforms. And what is important here, it's not only advocacy, but in this sphere of the EU integration, Ukrainian civil society is acting together with politicians, which is pretty rare for Ukraine, because in other spheres, Ukrainian NGOs mostly used to oppose political sphere. Here in the EU integration processes, they can mutually help each other, mutually assist each other, and working together for the positive result. And third, but not the last, function of civil society here is an expert diplomacy, I would add, because all over the Europe, I can see brave Ukrainian female and male representatives of civil society, mostly they're female experts who promote this idea, who are very on the same page and who are united in their position and advocate the fast accession of the Ukraine to the European Union. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Yuliya, for your attention on the general mood of Ukrainians and mentioning those facts that European integration is joining Ukrainian but not dividing. So we slowly move to the end of our discussion. I want to mention that the next citizen dialogue on EU enlargement, citizens integration of Georgia will be held in September. If you want to find more information about citizen dialogue on EU accession of Ukraine, you can find it in the chart. If you want to be informed about future citizens dialogue, you can also register for EUD newsletter by writing an email to Bürger Dialogue or Europa-Union there. You will find this mail in a chat. I just want to say thank you to the speakers and to the participants that you find time on the Friday evening, and instead of drinking tea or coffee, you decided to speak about possible accession process for Ukraine. Podcasts on all three citizens dialogue about EU enlargement will be published in September. There is a possibility to listen to the citizens dialogue on YouTube, and it is very important for us to receive your feedback, and we will be grateful a lot if you can fill the feedback form, since we needed to improve our citizens dialogue in future. I wish all of us safe evening and to have a good summer weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, friends. Thank
So
you.
for
I
Vatanya.
wanted to say regard from
Thank
my
you.
constituency and to show you that the life in Kharkiv, the hero city is continuing. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Mariia. Stay safe in Kharkiv.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.